We're here today with Sean Shefflin, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Green Nicotine and greennicotine.com. Sean, I've been doing an awful lot of reading, as you know, and I'm not a smoker. But I got to tell you that I find myself intrigued by your product, and I've asked you here today so that we can talk about several of the things that I believe that the viewers are going to be very interested in hearing about. In as brief of a statement as you can make, will you please tell me why you did this?
Sure. I'm no stranger to what tobacco use can do to the user and his family. I come from a long list of family members that have passed from traditional tobacco use or are passing from traditional tobacco use. So I'm no stranger to the side effects and harm tobacco use can do on the user and his or her family.
In my research, I've noticed that your product is made overseas, like most are. How did you go about selecting the factory that would cover or carry and make your product?
Are we talking about Chinese manufacturing?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Obviously, I was trying to be tactful.
Well, I think if one were to investigate, they'd see that my approach to Chinese manufacturing is considerably different than competitors throughout the industry. I think, with good reason, a lot of corporations use Chinese manufacturing. Ends up being a lot cheaper and saving a lot of money, and consumers want things as cheap as they possibly can get them. But with this product, quality control can't be cut. Research and development can't be cut. And I think the problem when deciding on a factory is you have to realize that it's not just one factory that you're working with. If you strike a deal with a certain factory, they might work with 7 or 8 factories and trading companies. So it's a very thorough process that you need to go through in order to find the right factory, especially when it deals with something you're putting in your lungs as revolutionary as this.
So you've met with this factory and have qualified them as the people you want to do business with, that you like.
Well, I'm kind of going against corporate rule and you know, trying to negotiate the lowest possible price I can get to produce my product. I wanted to establish a relationship, a long-term relationship with a trusted partner who was honorable. I think it's very important to do that when dealing with Chinese manufacturing. So numbers were never ever discussed 6, 7, 8 months into it. It was I visited there, he visited here. We formed a solid friendship, and at the point where I knew I could trust the manufacturer, the representatives of the manufacturer, to do what needed to be done for this concept, is the point when I formed a partnership.
Sean, you've explained about how you've chosen your factory, but let me embellish just a little bit more. How has the technology progressed in recent history?
Well, everything that's out there on the market generally looks like a traditional cigarette. It has a red tip, it has a beige brown filter, so it looks like the real thing, actually almost identical, and to someone that's not familiar with the concept, they would think it was a real cigarette. At Green Nicotine, I wanted to kind of move away from that general idea of how an electronic cigarette should look. And more importantly, I wanted the experience for the user and the non-smoking public around them to be a good experience. I did test the look of a real cigarette initially in my development stages. And in places where you can't smoke, people think you're smoking. And they ask you to leave, they get upset. They get a bad first impression of what's going on. And rightfully so, and as we've always been told, first impressions are pretty hard to work off. With Green Nicotine, what I've implemented is a green light, a green filter, so there's absolutely no comparison to a traditional cigarette. If you're out in a non-smoking environment and they see you utilizing Green Nicotine, it's more along the lines of, wow, what is that? How does it work? They're kind of proud that you're taking that step towards using an alternative to traditional tobacco, and next thing you know, they're asking how they can get one and where they can get one for a friend or a relative. So it's a much more socially acceptable product due to its appearance. as far as true progression of the technology is 2-piece units to 3-piece units, the atomizer components. It started out, the product consisted of a battery, an atomizer, which is a mini vaporizer, and a cartridge. The user would always keep the battery, always keep the atomizer, but the problem is atomizers always go bad, which means they burn out, which means the user has to buy new ones. Sometimes the user doesn't even realize it's gone bad and just thinks it tastes like junk and throws it away and does away with the concept altogether. More importantly, that atomizer is made out of nickel netting. The problem when nickel is exposed to heat, over time it breaks down, and microscopic particles of that nickel could potentially end up in the vapor. For me, the idea of that happening is obviously nothing I want associated with my company or my product. Furthermore, the cartridges are very flimsy in the old technology. They're pretty wide open. There's a cotton ball in them, nicotine squirted on them. It leaks into the user's mouth. If children get a hold of it, they could potentially get a hold of the fluid. Green Nicotine has implemented an integrated atomizer that's not made out of nickel netting, that's made out of ceramic and inorganic fibers that don't change chemical composition when exposed to heat. Our cartridges don't leak. We have fluid tanks within our cartridges to stop that from happening. Furthermore, all the components, including the mouthpiece, are antibacterial. In other words, the first time you go to use your product, within a 24-hour period, bacteria will build up by the millions. With Green Nicotine, you don't have that problem. You get a brand new atomizer each and every time you put on the cartridge. You don't have to use the same atomizer all the time. And you get a much more technological advanced cartridge than you're getting in a lot of the older technology that seems to be frequently implemented by competitors throughout the industry.
Sean, you've mentioned on several occasions about the components of your electronic cigarette. You seem to be very proud of it. What can you tell me, say, for example, on the battery that you've mentioned?
Well, obviously the battery is the driving force of the unit. It's what turns on, heats up the vaporizer, and at a certain temperature the flavor pouch and the nicotine vaporize, creating what looks, tastes, and feels like smoke. Well, airflow is what turns the battery on to start the whole process. And what really separates Green Nicotine from its competitors in this particular component is the airflow detection. Every unit out there, as far as the competitors are concerned, use what's called a mechanical airflow detection device. And it's basically just as it says, mechanical. It feels the airflow come in, opens up, and when the airflow stops, it shuts. Well, the problem you have is it can get stuck, which means the battery thinks there's airflow coming through and the battery will stay on, which can potentially be a serious injury causer. The user's lip can get burnt. They can put the product in their pocket and their leg could get burnt, or the battery itself could malfunction and a potential explosion. Green Nicotine has implemented electronic sensors. What these sensors do is recognize airflow. If these sensors go bad, there's no getting stuck. They shut off. They become inoperable. When that sensor shuts off, the whole unit becomes inoperable, completely eliminating the risk involved with the use of mechanical airflow detection device.
Wonderful. That seems quite an innovative technology, and you indicated that that's a patented product from, of your factory?
Among other things, along with the integrated atomizer as well as the sensory technology.
Wonderful. Now, you also mentioned the flavor and the cartridges, the liquid cartridges. What can you tell me, or what can you embellish on that without giving away any trade secrets?
Well, I mean, it's pretty commonly known what makes the vapor in an electronic cigarette is a substance called propylene glycol. And Green Nicotine used to implement this fluid, no longer does so, and I'll explain why. Propylene glycol is an FDA-approved substance for human consumption. It's virtually in everything we eat and drink. The problem is a very common contaminant in propylene glycol is diethylene glycol. Well, that's associated with antifreeze. Now, Green Nicotine used to use propylene glycol, however, would take this to a separate facility, test it, and make sure it was not present of the contaminant diethylene glycol. However, with all the controversy swirling around with the use of propylene glycol, we completely abandoned it. We now use vegetable glycol, which is a substance that eliminates the allergic reactions associated with PG in a very, very small percentage of the population, the sore throat, the dry mouth, and the contaminants are gone. There's no diethylene glycol in vegetable glycol, no possibility of that happening. Furthermore, vegetable glycol is a much thicker substance than propylene glycol, so in turn, on accident, it actually creates a better, thicker vapor volume, which equals a better smoking experience. And when you're creating an alternative, the closer you can get to real smoking, the more effective it's going to be for the user.
And that's why the smoke is really what, and the ingestion of the nicotine is what gives the smoker that sensation of having a true cigarette or cigar even, you know.
Right. I mean, if you didn't blow out smoke, and it's not smoke, it's a vapor.
Vapor,
but
of
if
course.
you didn't blow out something as a smoker, the unit would not be effective for you. Because along with the nicotine, and there's a smoking experience that smokers have become addicted to. Putting a cigarette up to their mouth, feeling smoke go within their lungs, blowing smoke out. Green nicotine simulates the whole entire process right to the T. Aside from the nicotine, the patterns of behavior that the users become addicted to.
What responsibilities do you find that you have in reference to minors and because I'm looking out there and I'm seeing with other companies that they're making watermelon, cotton candy, all these different flavors that frankly, as a parent, I would be concerned about my child thinking that this would be kind of cool.
As you should be, and you're not alone. I mean, there's parents all across the country that feel the same way you feel about it, and now lawmakers are starting to feel the same way, and the Food and Drug Administration feel the same way. And frankly, I'm in the same boat with y'all. I don't agree in fruit flavors, and I don't agree in this product being sold to minors, and there's certain things that differentiate me from the competition that I've put in place within the organization. And one is age verification. I mean, clearly the product shouldn't be used by someone under the age of 18, nor even a non-smoker. At all my locations throughout the country, if you're a non-smoker and you want to buy this product, you're just not allowed to buy it. Unless the only exception we'll make is if you're buying it for a friend or a relative, because I firmly believe this is a product for a serious smoker, and I don't want this product to create a new smoker. Because the problem you have with other companies selling this product to people who don't smoke is what happens if their battery dies when they're out at a club or a bar having a cocktail, and their buddy next to them is smoking a real cigarette, and they pick up one. And they do that 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, and they end up smoking real cigarettes. Furthermore, the minors is such an important issue. And I've implemented the strictest age verification program within the industry. And I've cut out a lot of business in doing so. There's shipping companies, obviously, all over the world, UPS, FedEx, United States Postal Services. And there's certain things in place for alcohol. In other words, when you order something offline and the product's delivered to you, you have to show identification to prove you are of legal age before the driver releases the package to you. Within the electronic cigarette industry, it's a simple check yes if you're over 18, we'll send you the package. Well, I know if I'm 15, 16, 17, I'm going to check yes, and you're going to send me the package, and I'm going to have this neat little gadget that could potentially be a gateway to me smoking a real cigarette. Well, the shipping companies wouldn't implement an 18 and up policy for me, so I just scratched out those 3 years of clientele, and I have a 21 years or over policy on the internet. If you order Green Nicotine, you better show identification before it gets delivered to you. I'm a firm believer in we can't create new smokers.
Well, actually, it's quite refreshing, frankly. I enjoy hearing stories like that relate to some sort of a social consciousness. And you like that? You like the social consciousness, and even though it means costing you a little bit of business?
Well, as I told you, I come from a long history of illnesses related to traditional tobacco. So my heart and soul went into this product, which means my mission and vision for the product are going to go hand in hand with that. My policies are always going to be ethical, and I'm always going to ensure that I'm getting people away from smoking. But you had talked about fruit flavors and marshmallow flavors and things of that nature.
Right.
And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. From day one, Green Nicotine has only sold traditional flavors, a regular flavor and a menthol flavor. Because a serious smoker doesn't need fruit, marshmallow, strawberry, banana. Those are flavors that appeal to a younger generation and appeal to the non-smoking public. And I think the problem that you have with those products is kids are going to try them. In fact, I've tested these flavors: strawberry, banana, apple, cherry. And it was really my first day of testing these flavors when I realized 10 or 12 hours later, I hadn't let the unit down. I hadn't stopped hitting it. It was that good. And at that point, I realized the real potential in marketing these flavors. Not only could young adults or teenagers that aren't even of legal smoking age get a hold of them, like them, take them to their schools. Next thing you know, all the kids in school are using them. But non-smokers could look at this alternative as a smoke-free way to try smoking, end up getting involved because they love this banana-flavored electronic cigarette, and then one day be out at a bar, a restaurant, a nightclub, mall, movie theater, wherever they may be, their battery goes out, and their friend next to them has a real cigarette. And now they're smoking a real cigarette. And that happens 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Now they're buying packs. Now we've created a smoker. I mean, there's a reason why lawmakers are turning heads about the idea of fruit flavors. There's a reason why the FDA is alarmed about it. It's a real possibility. And electronic cigarette company owners should understand it's a real possibility and not offer them for sale. And then there's what they call e-juices, which are these modification units that the user pours their own nicotine in, and they come in strawberry juice, banana juice, blackberry juice. I mean, think about it. E-juice. I mean, doesn't that sound like a candy cocktail? I mean, what do you think a 12-year-old's going to think about mommy and daddy's e-juice? What do you think a 15 or 16-year-old's going to think about Uncle Johnny's e-juice? I mean, we've labeled this thing. I mean, it's nicotine. It's a poison. The electronic cigarettes are designed as an alternative to smoking. We don't need to glamorize this thing. Everyone that uses this product is trying to get some sort of help some way. We don't glamorize it. And what happens when Uncle Johnny puts it down on the counter and little Johnny comes running up and sees strawberry e-juice and downs the whole bottle? We got a serious issue on our hands. A serious issue. And all it's going to take is a story here in California, a story in Arizona, a story in Texas, a story in Florida, and a reporter to start putting all those together. And what's going to happen to the electronic cigarette industry? It goes bye-bye because of just horrible marketing and products that we shouldn't have brought to the forefront in the first place. And aside from it attracting minors to the concept, which could potentially one day create traditional tobacco smokers, is the user. I mean, they're not regulated. They can put a drop in here, a drop in there. They can put 10 milligrams in, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50. And it's not any fault of their own, but let's say they wake up at 8, 9 o'clock and put a couple drops in. 10, 11 o'clock, put a few more drops in. Well, now they're overdoing the product. And now, instead of helping somebody and giving them their little nicotine fix, their alternative to traditional tobacco, now we're creating a drug addict that's got to have that high, which ends up being similar to a heavy narcotic. It's not my business. And I don't think anyone associated with the electronic cigarette industry who has any pride in what they're doing should promote these items for sale. And the real problem lies in the fact that there's no regulation there. When you have a green nicotine cartridge, the amount of nicotine that's in it is the amount of nicotine that's in it. When you have a bottle of nicotine in a unit that you can put however much nicotine you want in there, it's going to create abuse. And some of it might not be knowingly. You're going to start out in the morning with 1 or 2 or 3 drops, and 2 hours later you're going to jump to 4 and 5 drops. And again, we've gone against the very grain of why we're using an alternative. And instead of helping somebody get their quick fix, we've created an addict. We've created a drug addict. Somebody that's going to want that type of high, because when you're shoving 25, 35, 40 milligrams of nicotine in your system's going to have a reaction. And some people might get addicted to that reaction, which will go against the very base and foundation of why we developed the product.
What about ethics? What's your stand on ethics with green nicotine?
Well, I mean, it all relates to what we've talked about: fruit flavors, modification units. It's the corporate law. Build things as cheap as you can, cut as many pennies as you can get cut here to make the most profit when you're moving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of units a month. But you can't do that with the electronic cigarette. You can't do that with something that you're putting in your body. You can't do that with something that you sell, somebody else uses, exposes their children to its vapor. You just can't do it. And when you're creating new smokers by selling fruit flavors, when kids are getting harmed because they've consumed these strawberry e-juices, these stories are going to add up. Lawmakers' eyes are going to turn. The FDA is going to say, hey, you know, this has a lot of potential, but the risk far outweighs the reward, and the electronic cigarette industry goes. And then what happens? Think about that.
Sean, we've talked about many of the physical aspects of your electronic cigarette and how green nicotine is made, where it's made. Let me ask you, let's get more personal. What is your motivation? What was your motivation? What is your motivation for green nicotine?
Well, as I've said in the beginning, I come from a family that's riddled with illnesses from traditional tobacco use. A grandfather that passed from lung cancer, a dad with emphysema, uncles with COPD, cancer riddled throughout my family. And if they're not dead from smoking, they're dying from smoking. I visit hospitals 2, 3, 4 times a week with my father, who has emphysema. And it's a torturous way to go out of this world. Gasping for breath, your CO2 levels rising beyond belief and your oxygen levels decreasing and going into delirium, and your family being right there while all that's going on. It's definitely not something anybody wants to go through. And I believe that green nicotine could potentially one day make that non-existent. See, right now, as a smoker, as a young smoker, we think we're bulletproof. We don't realize that it's a very real possibility that we'll end up in the position of my father or position of my grandfather, or that we're exposing our children to second and third hand smoke, or that on a global scale, 600,000 people are dying each and every year that don't even smoke because of secondhand smoke. I mean, we don't realize these things. To create a product that looks, tastes, and feels just like the real thing, minus the 400,000 deaths associated with traditional tobacco, minus smelling like an ashtray, minus spending $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $11 a pack, minus all the bad stuff. That's what green nicotine is. That's what this concept is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stir up any emotions for you there, Sean, but it's again refreshing to see the passion that somebody seems to have in their product. I'm delighted that I've taken the time to research a little bit more on the e-cigarette industry, and I appreciate your time today, and I hope that the viewers will have an opportunity very soon to make a difference in their lives and the lives of their family members by embracing a product as Green Nicotine and greennicotine.com offers. Is there any last or final words that you would like to impart without looking at me, but look at the folks and talk to them for just a moment?
Well, I meant just imagine an environment no longer riddled with cigarette butts. Imagine traditional tobacco no longer being in existence and big tobacco no longer being big. Imagine our homes across the globe being void of second and third hand smoke, and hospitals no longer being riddled with patients that are there because of traditional tobacco use. Just imagine.